right, welcome back, fellow jazz bums. Today we are super excited and honored to have Adam Levy here. We're going to go into his new title and also his background. But before we do, remember to like and subscribe. We have the Jazz Bums Discord, so come hang out with us there. We also live stream on Friday night, so come check us out there as well. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Felipe to get us started.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chris. Welcome back. So today, born in Encino, California, he comes from a very musical family. Grandson of music director George Weil. He played in marching bands. He has a lot of music experience growing up. He studied Dick Grove School of Music. In the 90s, he becomes a studio musician. He records with Tracy Chapman. He was a member of the band Killer Joey. Goes back to New York. He meets Norah Jones, records some smash hit records with her. Then he goes play with Roseanne Cash, Amos Lee, Lisa Leb, among others. He becomes a writer for Music Guitar Player magazine. But on the side, he also has a very successful, important solo career, which we want to discuss. Since 2015, Adam has been chair of the guitar performance department at the Los Angeles College of Music. He published many books in music, and his latest called String Theories. He currently plays versus Rich Hillman in a duo. His last solo record, just released last year, is called Spry. It's a jazz trio, and it's available on Bandcamp. We're honored to have you today. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much, Adam, for making this happen. Thank you.
Yeah, Felipe, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I asked the same question to every single person we talk to when we first get started. Can you talk about like your young childhood background with music, how you got into music, maybe what your parents were into, and then how that progressed into becoming a musician?
Yeah. My parents, my birth parents split up when I was pretty young. And so I lived with my mom, but also went back and forth and spent some time with my dad. And my mom remarried when I was 8. And all of this matters. It's not just biographical, but I'll get to how that influenced me musically. Because I kind of had, those 3 parents, my mom and my dad and my stepdad. My mom, I think, had more pop kind of taste in music. So I remember growing up, her records in our home record collection were like Simon and Garfunkel, Cat Stevens, some of the later Beatles stuff like Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper. And then my stepdad was really into jazz, but very specific stuff. He loved Gabor Szabo.
Okay.
Who I'm sure I would have never, not many 11-year-olds are listening to Gabor Szabo, but I was like, my stepdad had this old Sony reel-to-reel deck, and this was, back when you could actually either buy commercial reel-to-reel stuff or just, record off your LPs. So I heard Gabor Szabo. My stepdad was really into the Crusaders, so I got to hear Larry Carlton. My stepdad was really into Benny Goodman, so I got to hear Charlie Christian. And then my dad, when I would spend time with him, was mostly into records that sounded good. I don't know that he was like an audiophile, but he really liked, he loved James Taylor, but specifically he loved this record called Flag, which is kind of a mid-period record for James Taylor. And that record sounds really good. Like that would be a good record to try out your new Blaupunkt car stereo in the 80s or whatever. So, and he would listen, he would crank it up. So those were kind of and then along with that, my grandfather, as you mentioned in the intro, was a studio musician, composer, arranger. So that had an influence on me too, as far as choosing a career. But it's just as far as like the sound of music, it was sort of a mix as a kid for me with like Simon and Garfunkel and Gabor Szabo and mid-period James Taylor and Gordon Lightfoot, because that's what my dad liked, and Jim Croce.
That's good. And why the guitar? How did you come across the guitar?
Because I failed at the other 2 things I tried. I tried to play piano because my grandfather when I was pretty young, bought himself a new piano and needed to find a home for the piano he had had for a lot of years. Like,
Mhm.
he wrote tons of music on this old it was I think it was an upright, not a spinet. But he was ready to let it go and he bought himself an upgraded piano. So he gave us his, and I tried to play it. I took piano lessons and was really terrible at it. I'm still terrible at the piano, but I mean, like, I get I get how it works, but I can't play it. And then I tried to play the clarinet, because we moved to a new town when I was 10 or 11, and my mom wanted me to do something social because we were in a new town, and she wanted me to, do something with other kids. And since I wasn't good at sports, she thought maybe I would try to join the band. So I started taking clarinet lessons, and I was terrible at it. And, and then one summer I was at like sleepover summer camp, and everybody had guitars. I mean, not the kids, but the counselors, the grown-ups had guitars. And I'd never, well, not never, but I hadn't much seen a guitar in person, even though I had been listening, like I said, to Charlie Christian, Larry Carlton, Gabor Szabo. And like, here was guitars. I could pick them up and play them. And somehow that came pretty easy to me. I don't know why. And then I came home from camp that summer, and I told my mom that I really enjoyed the guitar. And she said, "Oh, I have a guitar." And I had no idea. And she went, and wherever it was, in a closet or the garage, or I don't know where it was, she dusted it off and
That's
tuned it.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. Like, it was like finding out, like, your mom is actually like a superhero. You didn't even know. Like, you see this costume hanging. Oh yeah, I'm Wonder Woman, or Captain Marvel, or whatever. Like, well, really? So she showed me everything she knew, and got the guitar tuned up so I could play it, um, and that's that's how I got started.
I know, I know that you decided at an early age to pursue being a professional musician, and I know your grandfather was a professional musician, very successful, very active within the arranger world. He has done pieces like "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the World," and Gilligan's Island theme, which are two things that everybody across the planet knows.
Yeah.
And of course, much more than that. I don't want to
Yeah.
reduce his efforts just to those two things, but just for viewers, just to know. But I wanted to ask, because when you were kind of young and working through learning your music, your instrument, and then as you kind of progressed into the professional world, were you able to kind of communicate with him? I heard an interesting story that you were telling about how he was kind of talking to you about studio musicians, and maybe this one wasn't so great, and this one was the one that he held in high regard. Was he able to provide like levels of insight into that, and kind of help shape how you wanted to approach being a studio musician?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, he never. I don't remember him ever like sitting me down and saying, "Look, let me tell you how it is." But um, I saw that he had a strong work ethic. He always. I mean, it shouldn't even need saying, but he always got his work done, got it done early, showed up early. Um, if he needed help, like if he was a good thing about arranging at that time, this is in the early 70s, throughout the 70s, there were so many arrangers around LA. That's where I grew up, and they would always send each other jobs. And so once in a while, if he was just overwhelmed, he could farm out stuff to Gerald Wilson or Frank Duvall or Joe Harnell or Billy May, or these were guys in his circle. And the things that I learned from my grandfather weren't because he sat me down, but I'll tell you a couple things that I learned from him that I still hold in high regard. One is that, for him as an arranger, he needed guitar players who could read. And if you couldn't read, he just had no interest in like somebody who was a hot soloist or who had, all the cool sounds or whatever. At that time, and he started at the beginning of what being a studio musician even was. To him, it was somebody who could play what he had put on the page because he was an arranger. So without ever telling me, like, kid, you got to learn to read, I saw that was valuable. Another thing was loyalty. Like, he pretty much hired the same guys all the time because he could count on them, and he knew that his music would get played the way he wanted, by being loyal to these guys and finding his own wrecking crew. He didn't really, I do remember being at a session where Hal Blaine was on drums, and I might have met some of the other like original wrecking crew guys, but those weren't really his main guys. He found his own wrecking crew and he gave them as much work as he possibly could. And then he hung out a lot with his arranger friends. Like, I think once a month they would have these luncheons and they would kind of roast each other. They would write goofy lyrics to each other's songs and sing them and tell jokes. And it was, it was all in good fun. But like the fact that he would get together with these guys on the regular stuck with me too. He wasn't just like how I imagine a lot of people are now who work in film and TV music. They're kind of in their they create a little home studio and they write their music and they send it off to the production company, but they're not, I don't know, but this is how I imagine. I don't imagine that they're as much of a social club as what it was back in the 70s. Anyway, I got, those are things I learned from my grandfather that are still with me,
Very cool. So we talked about, you picked up the guitar at 11. And did you play in bands like in high school and stuff? So
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Like bands that you and your friends formed, or was there
like 4-piece rock bands?
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. I was in a 4-piece rock band called Dark Star.
Okay.
Our drummer's mom made these awesome iron-on t-shirts for us that said Dark Star. So somewhere on YouTube, I uploaded this. Like one of the shows we played, somebody videotaped it, and there's a video of me singing "Johnny Be Good" with our band. I was not the front guy, but that was my like feature.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody wants to see,
that's freaking awesome. Dark Star's a great name, man.
Yeah. We played all kinds of stuff. Like we played a Rush song, "Closer to the Heart."
Nice.
We played Dancing with Myself, which was Billy Idol, Gen X.
Mm-hmm.
I think we played a UFO song.
Nice. That's awesome.
And then, I sang "Johnny Be Good." So it was a pretty wide, rock and roll writ large, I guess.
And so after high school, you went to college for music. What was that? Where did you go, and what was that experience like?
I went to a place in Los Angeles, in Studio City. It was called the Dick Grove School of Music. It was a great experience for me. It was a small school. I think there were 12 guitar players in my cohort, which is a pretty nice, student to teacher ratio. No big guitar stars teaching there, but some really great teachers, and then they'd have guests come in. and give workshops and stuff. And so I went there for a year. I got to do a little bit more a la carte stuff, but basically I went through their 1-year guitar program, and then I went back for another year and studied arranging and composing. And that was interesting that second year, because I really barely touched the guitar that year. It was more about writing for woodwinds and brass and a little bit writing for strings. And I would, that's a year that I really didn't play the guitar, and I wouldn't take it back if, I think every guitar player could benefit from some period of time where they're studying music really intensely, but not on the guitar, whatever that, doesn't have to be arranging, but any kind of off the instrument study could be really valuable.
When you're studying like arrangement and composition, are you in a position to work with an ensemble to like provide that level of direction in addition to writing? And like, is it very hands-on?
It was, the first couple of semesters, it was all kind of just learning. And the second couple of semesters, every week they'd bring in ensembles for us that we would have, we'd get an assignment on Thursday or Friday to write something. And then Monday or Tuesday, they would hire that size, whatever it was, group to come in and play it. And we would each get, 15 minutes at the to conduct and get our music played. So we learned, all of us, really quickly to write, not only to compose music that was clear and comprehensible, but also, nobody had Finale or Sibelius back then. We were just all, pen and ink.
That's right.
Since you were only going to have 15 minutes to get your 5 minutes of music played, it had to be very, all the parts had to be very clear, or you're just wasting everyone's time. But beyond that, I didn't push myself to start an ensemble that I could write for. Looking back, I wish I had, because, I've hardly written for those instruments since then. And I look back, like, my friend Anthony Wilson, you guys have probably spoken with him.
Yeah.
And, he's done a lot of different things. I mean, he's just an evolving artist. It's just so great. But first time I heard him was when he had, I think, a Nonette and was writing. And I listened to those records and I thought, wow.
Oh yeah.
It's like a guitar player, band leader, arranger, writing, like, that's what I wish, looking, if I could go back, I would have, with all the stuff I learned in school, I mostly in the end wound up applying it directly to the guitar when I re-picked up the guitar. But those Anthony Wilson kind of records with music that he wrote and arranged for his ensembles are just incredible. I don't know if it didn't occur to me that I could try to do something like that, or if I just didn't believe in myself enough to do it. But what a great thing for a guitar player to have that kind of.
Well, don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, guys.
So Adam, right after college, then, how did you land into being a studio musician? How did that happen? How was that transition to you? Or were you doing something else before that, or you directly you had the chance to be a studio musician?
No, I was. What was I doing before that? I was working at a bakery. Is what I was doing. Really, I don't want to make too big of a thing of it, but I really, looking back, didn't push myself to go for it as much as maybe I should have. So it took me a while to actually become a studio musician, even though that's exactly what I had wanted to do since I was, 13 or something. So for a few years, I was literally working at this bakery in Santa Monica, and it was this bakery was inside this kind of fancy clothing shop in Santa Monica called Fred Siegel. And one day Robin Ford came into the bakery and bought coffee and a muffin, and I really wanted to talk to him, but I'm just like, I'm wearing an apron and I'm covered in powdered sugar, and he doesn't care, that and that would happen a lot. And one time I saw Miles Davis walking around, not in the bakery part, but in the clothing area. And I just thought, wow, I'm so close and so far from what I want to be doing. So eventually I quit the bakery and I left LA, even though that's like the seat of the studio recording scene. I was following my heart, and my girlfriend at the time got accepted to school in Northern California. So I moved up to San Francisco and started playing a lot of music up there, actually way more music than I had played in LA, strangely. And mostly live music, but then that led to studio work because people would see me on a gig and then hire me to play on recordings. And very long story short, that playing gigs around San Francisco, playing with singer-songwriters this is in the early 1990s, that time period really is what led to me working with Tracy Chapman in 95, 94, 95. And then that is what got more people aware of me as a studio guy. I was really more of a live guitar player. I loved that, playing with people on the scene, music that's just happening in the moment. And yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
That's amazing. I mean, that Tracy Chapman record's New Beginnings, right?
Yeah.
Huge record. I mean, what did that feel like? Going to playing gigs and maybe recording some stuff, and then all of a sudden you're on this album that sells 5 million copies.
It blew my mind, really. Like, that was the kind of thing I had dreamed about doing, and then it happened. And I was kind of like, oh, it's almost like I think of my cat a lot. Like, sometimes he'll jump up some place high up, like on a shelf that he hasn't been before. Like, he was a little shy when we got him, and then he'll jump up and he'll kind of have this look like, oh wow, I did it, like, and that's how I felt, at the time. Like, it was such a big leap from what I had been doing, even though it's what I wanted to be doing. I had not before that had the experience where you would just like go to the supermarket and hear yourself on the sound system, or hear a car driving by listening. And it was really the first, but it was the first thing that I had done musically where if you told a regular person what you were up to, they'd go like, oh, I know that. Like, I was playing so much music, but not really with people that were household names, So that was nice, because then when you meet people and they're like, what do you do? And oh, I play with Tracy Chapman. They're like, oh, cool.
Yeah, I bet.
Good feeling.
I know when you were in San Francisco, you also worked for, is it Blue Bear School of Music? Am I getting that right? So
Yeah.
did you have to, I mean, this might sound silly, but did you have to leave that position when you kind of started working with Tracy? Okay.
I did. Yeah, because a thing about Tracy was even before we started touring, and I only toured with her a little bit, um, but we were rehearsing like 5 days a week for
Oh, wow.
months.
Hmm.
She had the band on retainer, and while we were developing arrangements for her new songs, she also wanted us to be able to play her catalog up to that point, and she'd already made 3 records before
Mhm.
New Beginnings, so we were working on those songs and vocal arrangements and musical arrangements, and so yeah, I had to stop teaching at Blue Bear because I was most weeks I was in a rehearsal studio with Tracy and the band, you know, all day. So
Wow.
I yeah, maybe not what people would expect, but that's what we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a follow up on that real quick. When y'all recorded the album, was it different than other recording sessions you had been on? Was it the level of production different, or just the scope and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, by leaps and bounds. Most of the recording I had done up to that point was well. Let me back up. I did one session with my grandfather before he retired when he was 70 and I was 20 or something thereabouts. Like he waited to retire until he could kind of pass the baton to me. So I did one like a session for a TV show with my grandfather when I was 19 or 20, and that was like a full on 20 musicians in the room, my grandfather conducting, 2 guitar players on the session, both 2 separate books to read. So that was like a glimpse of that. But then after that, most of the sessions that I had done had been kind of friends and I was gonna say friends and family, but grandfather is family. But just friends, studios, smaller places. This was kind of during the boom of home recording. It
Mhm.
was, it's starting to be a big thing. So I'd done lots of little sessions, but when we recorded with Tracy, we were there for a week, maybe more. We lived at the studio. They were set up to do that. There was, I mean, you're asking about the level of production. I'm
Mhm.
thinking even outside the recording production, there's like, an on-site chef cooking the meals,
Oh, wow.
and like it was like
The
a
big
whole
time.
thing. Yeah. And then yeah, there was a great producer. It was still, I mean, we're still doing the same, we set up in a circle. There was more isolation in the studio.
Mhm.
In the rehearsal room, we just let it all bleed so we could hear each
Mhm.
other. But after all the rehearsing that we had done, um, the recording went pretty easy because we knew the songs, we knew the
Yeah.
arrangements, we knew
Mhm.
we had chemistry, we had developed this chemistry together. And but yeah, it was the first time really like to go in the mix in the control room and like hear something we had just played coming out of these state of the art sound system. And
Where did you record that?
it's a place called The Site. um it's, I don't know if people talk about it now as much, but at that time it was pretty a big. Have you guys heard of it?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
It's kind of near like where George Lucas had his Lucas Sound studio. It's
Mhm.
not that, it's not on that property, but it's north of San Francisco.
Okay.
This property on a hillside that's a great place to just get out of town and
Mhm.
and make a record. Pearl Jam had just recorded there right before us. It's a hard thing to look. I've tried to look up and see what's happening there now, but
Mhm.
because it's called The Site, SITE,
Mhm.
I found it
Yeah.
kind of hard to Google
I bet.
because it's such a common
Yeah.
word. But anyway,
Like, yeah, it's like
uh,
looking up the band the right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. But if anybody knows, I'd be curious. At that time, it was really considered, a great state of the art place to make a record.
Very cool. I did. I did just want to take a step back and ask about when did your kind of personal interest in jazz form, and were there guitarists that you kind of gravitated to at first? Is that kind of what pulled you into jazz, or was it just the genre, in general? And just kind of like how did jazz kind of come into your form?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing was, like I said, about my stepdad was really into like Benny Goodman and the Crusaders, but it really got me when I started to talk with people my own age, who were into it. So, like when I was in high school, I joined, I'm trying to remember what they called it. It was either like the pep band, or like we would play at basketball games and stuff. And a lot of the other kids, like the horn players in that band, were already into jazz. I was maybe on the younger side within high school, and they were probably juniors and seniors. And so I remember somebody lent me a Miles Davis record, and somebody lent me a Thelonious Monk record. And so it was one thing to hear my stepdad talk about jazz, but it kind of started to connect more when I met people my own age, more or less, who loved the music. So that was a big moment. I remember like borrowing those records, and or just going to somebody's house and listening. And then another thing was I was reading Guitar Player magazine. Every month I'd get the new issue. And I think because, I don't know, like some of the rock, this just has to do with image, nothing to do with actual music, but I didn't relate to the rock imagery of the kind of long hair and the, I don't know. I would see the pictures of the rock guitar players, and I was like, that doesn't look that cool. And then I'd see like an interview with John Scofield, who either while he was still with Miles or maybe just after that. And I thought, well, this guy seems pretty cool. And or George Benson, or Larry Coryell, who had a regular column. And so I lived near a record store, and every month I'd go buy the new issue of Guitar Player magazine, and I'd kind of gloss over the rock and roll interviews, and I'd read the jazz interviews or the jazz lesson stuff. And then I'd go over to the bargain bin and see, is there a Larry Coryell record for $2.99 that I could buy, or a George Benson record, or a John Scofield record? And that was really a big thing. So I had a record called the George Benson Cookbook. That was really great, with Ronnie Cuber on baritone. And there was a Larry Coryell record that had John Scofield on it. It's called Tributaries. It's an acoustic record. It's John Scofield and Joe Beck playing with Larry Coryell. And I got this Scofield record, which was kind of new at the time, called Still Warm, with Omar Hakim and Daryl Jones and Don Grolnick on keys. That one was not a bargain record because it was a new record. And so that was a big thing, like reading interviews with the jazz guys in Guitar Player magazine was the thing that really connected it. I play guitar, these guys play guitar, because I don't know, that was really big for me.
Yeah.
Now, were you playing much jazz like when you were up in San Francisco before the Tracy Chapman thing happened?
I was, yeah. I played a lot of duo gigs with singers. Like for me, a big part of jazz was always tunes, standards.
Yeah.
Not that cutting edge or experimental, really, but I loved I mean, where my head was at. I mean, to say at that
Sure.
time, I wasn't trying to,
Yeah.
you know, I'm trying to like break the barriers of jazz, but I loved tunes, and I think that came from my grandfather. Like to him, the highest form of art in music was Irving Berlin. It wasn't Charlie Parker
Mhm.
or Errol Garner, even. Like he really liked tunes. So I played a lot of jazz duo gigs with singers, like just in cafes and stuff. And then I started to want to have my own group probably after I heard when Schofield was had his quartet with Joe Lovano,
Mhm.
like Time on My Hands and To Be, those records. That was I put together a quartet and I started writing for tenor sax and guitar, electric guitar, and upright bass and drums. And I don't know that my tunes sounded much like Schofield's tunes as far as composition, but that sound just sounded like the perfect sound to me. And even like the Paul Motion, mostly those Paul Motion records, the trio stuff with Bill and Joe Lovano. But there's,
Mhm.
I think, at least one with Mark Johnson, maybe the Bill Evans record.
Mm.
There was sometimes bass on those Motion records with Bill and Joe Lovano. So around that time, hearing those records got me to lead a group, which I hadn't
Mhm.
done before as a jazz writer and player.
Do you have any? So I love standards as well. Do you have any favorite standards that kind of stick out that you have that are your preferred ones, or do you like them all?
No, I lean on. I mean, stuff that I like to play.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I go back to body and soul all the time. I never tire of that. There's a Cole Porter song called "I Love Paris."
Oh, I love that song.
I think that's such a great song. I play that all the time on gigs. There's a song called "Gravy Waltz," which is a Ray Brown tune that I like to play, which is just kind of a folksy. Well, people put all kinds of substitutions on it, but
Mhm.
you can play it as a more like a folksy, churchy, kind of uh, jazz waltz with fairly straightforward changes. I like to play that tune. Yeah, those are some of the ones that I lean on. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Mhm.
I recently played Kona Alma, and I forgot. I used to love that tune,
Oh
the
yeah.
Dizzy Gillespie tune, and I hadn't played it in years. And then I found myself on a gig in Alma, Wisconsin, and it occurred to
Mhm.
me, oh, we're in Alma. Maybe you know, maybe I'll play this tune, and I think it kind of kicked my. I don't know if I can swear on your
Yeah,
podcast, but
Of course you can. Yeah.
well,
drop
it
it.
kicked my ass.
Mhm.
It seems like, oh, it's not that hard of a tune, maybe, but to really get inside it is a lot. And also lately I've been really into the Horace Silver song Peace. It's another one that
Okay.
you look at it on the page, it's like, oh, it's whatever, 12 bars, 16. It's not a lot, but when you try to play it and really get inside it, it's a masterpiece, really.
Oh yeah.
Did anybody in Alma pick up that you were playing that song?
No, no, I thought they would, and I even said something, and people were just like, no, they just
You're like,
seemed
okay,
like,
okay, thanks everyone.
yeah, yeah,
Oh shit, that's funny.
That's funny.
It's a great tune though. I love that song.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's one of my favorite things about jazz is the tunes, and then trying
Yeah.
and seeing how different people
Yeah.
interpret them and how they evolve over time and all that sort of thing.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that's one. Maybe you guys will know because you're the jazz bums. Like, there's a way to play Kona Alma. Like the way it is in the real book anyway. The A sections start on E. And then, but at the end of the bridge, there's this 2-5, there's like a F minor 7, B flat 7, and you think it almost sounds like you're going to go to E flat, but it goes back to E. But I heard somebody do it where you actually do play the last A section in E flat, and then when you get back to the top, you go up to E. And I don't know who started that, but I don't think that that's how Dizzy Gillespie wrote it or recorded it. Do you guys know what I mean?
No,
None of us are musicians, so we're stupid.
we're
when it comes to stuff.
we're gonna have to do a deep dive into every iteration
Every
of that.
version of town and all that.
We'll get back to you on
For
that one.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have to go study.
Yeah.
We'll come back.
For
Well,
sure.
it's funny, yeah. Well, there's a quote on Art Blakey's Moanin' where Lee Morgan plays a quote from it sounds like a Clifford Brown song, and Clifford Brown quotes it. And I listened to a podcast, and they were able to trace it all the way back to. It was like, I don't know, like a big band arranger, and they sped it up really quickly, and they kept quoting it. And I hear it all the time. Like I was listening to this like random Argo record yesterday with I forget who the trumpet player is, and he's quoting it. And I want to do a video of just like all of the like how that evolved. So anyway,
Please do. I love that. Like, oh, the kind of the long game of telephone or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. By the way, that solo, both of like Lee Morgan on that and is it Benny Golson?
Benny Golson,
I think.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those two solos, like everybody should learn what you like, transcribe it or like just learn what you can, because they're just incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And that also traces to Kind of Blue, right? If you think about the intro to those songs, because Jimmy Merritt was playing with Bill Evans prior to recording those two records, so it's quite interesting that those intros to So What and to Moaning, and those chords is interesting. Yeah. They kind of exchange ideas there.
Yeah, Jamie Merritt's on Moanin'. That's right.
Yeah. Right here.
Wow.
Yeah. I think they were playing with Tony Scott or something. Can't remember exactly. Yeah.
And those albums are both 59, right? They
exactly. Yeah. So they kind of exchange some ideas there. That's a fact. Yes. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So Adam, one thing I would like to ask you. Then in 2000, you have your first record, right? Live at Avalon.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a series of records on Lost Wax, 2001, 3, 6, and 7. At the same time, you had landed on a even smashier hit set of records there. How were you able to manage that, putting your own production and also working and touring at the same time? How was that period for you?
Yeah. For me, it worked out great because the way at that time, so I was touring with Norah I was playing with her before Come Away With Me came out, but of course when it came out, then there was a lot of road work. And the way that she wound up doing it as far as touring was like, she'd work a record for, really intensely for, 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year. And then she would just take a year off and she'd just be like, okay, guys, I'm going to take a break, write some new music, and then we'll do it and we'll come back. And that happened between the first and second record and the second and third record. Second record is Feels Like Home, and third record is Not Too Late. And in a way, it was perfect because during the year I was touring with her on Come Away With Me, I was able to sock away some money. And when we had the break, I could, work on my own music and not be like, in a way, I feel like I'm more scatterbrained now than I was then. It was a luxury in retrospect to have one gig that was enough work and enough income that when I had a break, I could work on my own music. And I know like, oh yeah, next February we're going to start up again. So I have a real window of time, got a little bit of money saved up. I don't have to be doing 10 or 12 other things to, pay the rent that month. And it was nice. It was a really, in retrospect, a really luxurious
Yeah.
way to work. So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about Norah a little bit. Obviously, I've got this amazing record behind me. When you started playing with her, I mean, you worked on this album. Did y'all have any idea of how huge it was going to be?
I sure didn't. I think Blue Note must have had an inkling because they really doubled down on that record. Like I've told this story, I'll keep this short, but people may know or they may not know. Like that first record was really the result of a few sessions. It wasn't just like, let's go in the studio for a week and make a record, which was like the Tracy Chapman record was that. Everything you hear on that New Beginning record happened. Well, I mean, there might have been an overdub or two, but pretty much that record is what happened that week. Come Away With Me started when Norah first was introduced to Bruce Lundvall at Blue Note. And he said, well, here's like a little bit of money. Can you go in the studio and make some demos? And she recorded Don't Know Why and some of the other stuff that eventually did wind up on the record. And then Blue Note loved it and said, great, here's some real money. Let's get you in the studio with a producer and let's do a full album. And that first session came out. Blue Note released it. It's called First Session or First Sessions. And you can find that probably on the internet now. It was limited pressing back in the original CD run. And then she did a whole other session with one producer. And then which I wasn't on. And then she wasn't totally happy. Blue Note wasn't totally happy. And they decided, okay, let's go back and do one more session. And Norah, for that last final session, was working with producer Arif Mardin. And that's the stuff that I'm on, which is, I think, 8 songs on that first record. And so the record as it is actually an amalgam of those 3 sessions. It's the Don't Know Why on that record is just from the demo. I think she fixed the piano solo and overdubbed the ooze in the bridge. There's a few small changes, but that's basically from her demo. And then there's some stuff from the sessions that I'm not on, where you have Bill Frisell and Kevin Bright. And then there's the stuff that we recorded with Arif Mardin. And I'm trying to remember how we got here.
Just talking about the success of the record and
right. Okay. Yeah. So no, I didn't have any idea, but to think that Blue Note they were like, let's just make this record really the best that it can be, makes me think that they must have had an inkling, or else why else would they stay with it and invest in it? As you guys know, a lot of records get halfway and get shelved, or get all the way, get finished, mixed, mastered, done, and don't see the light of day. So I guess somebody knew. But to me, it was just a chance to play music with my friends and record for Blue Note, which was a big deal.
That had to be awesome. Yeah. Yeah. In the kind of history mythology of Blue Note, there's always like some record that comes out just in time to just really save the day out of nowhere, right? And I think this one's been credited as one of those.
Yeah.
I mean, you see the pictures of Norah at the Grammys, and she just like won everything. It's just, I love the record. I mean, it's one of my favorite records.
So we did want to jump into your latest efforts, which I just wanted to quickly share my screen because I have your Bandcamp up here, and this is the album here. It's a trio record. Here's the cover art. I did want to ask you about the cover art, but I think we can kind of get into the musicianship first. here are the guys. So it is Larry Grenadier bass and Joey Barron on drums. This is a few session photos, and this is a studio up in Woodstock. Is it let me get it right. It's NRS Recordings, and Scott Petito is the kind of engineer up there, who
Mhm.
people may know. He was part of the Fugs, which I know from, they have a couple releases on ESP disc. They're like a proto punk band, really really cool stuff. So it sounded like he was the engineer, and I think, Adam, you produced this. You were, producing. I don't know if these were just like staged photos, or if this is you guys. Did you guys play without headphones? And can you talk about just like the studio space and the
Awesome.
session itself, and how like the selection of musicians? I know like you've worked with these guys before. They're kind of in your circle, but can you kind of talk about that kind of stuff a little bit?
Yeah, Mike, that's a great. That's a great suite of questions. Those photos are not staged.
Okay.
We recorded the whole record without headphones.
Okay.
Very close together in space. That was really Joey's idea. He had never been to that studio before. I should just correct you. It's not in Woodstock. It's in the town of Catskill.
Okay.
And we wound up there because I asked Larry. Larry lives in Kingston, New York, and I asked him if there was a studio up that way ish that he liked, and he said, yeah, he had done some stuff at Scott Petito's place, which is NRS, and so he had been there before, but Joey had never been there before. And as soon as he walked in the room and saw the space, he's like, oh, what would happen if we didn't use headphones, if we just set up really close together and listen to each other? And that's what we did. So when you see those session photos that we recorded for 3 days, and most of it happened on day 1 and 2, and the photographer was there day 3. We got a couple of things recorded that day, and took a leisurely lunch break and took some photos. But yeah, that's in the studio while we're on a recording day. Those are real photos. As far as choosing the band, for a few months before that, I just was walking around with this idea in my mind of like, what would my dream trio be? And I thought about a lot of different rhythm sections. In New York, there's just so many great individual players and people who play together often. And but at that time, I had been listening a lot to Larry Grenadier's solo record, which is called The Gleaners, a solo upright bass record. And I was just so knocked out by his sound. I had played with him before. Of course, I've heard him with Brad Meldau, many times over the years. But that solo record really just was so special. I thought, that guy is going to play the bass. And then I started to think about drummers in New York. I asked Larry, who would you like to play with? Who do you have a good connection with? And he and I had a couple of emails back and forth that about that conversation. And then I just started to think about Joey, which was maybe I had seen him play in New York before that recently, recent to the session with Jakob Bro or somebody at the Vanguard. And he's just always was one of my all-time favorite drummers. And they had played together some, but we'd all played with each other, but not all three together. And I just thought that would be really an exciting sound. Larry has such a big, rich sound, and Joey, even though his sound is big, he also can sound big while not actually taking up a lot of space in the sound, or you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like
Mhm.
it's pretty miraculous the way that he plays. And and I just started writing tunes with those. Well, I reached out to those guys to ask if they would be up to do it, and that's how I wound up with that band.
Yeah, I listened to the whole album this morning, and I just thought it was beautiful, man. Just lovely,
Thank you.
gorgeous. We've talked to a lot of folks lately, and this kind of old school playing in the room together is kind of a recurring theme. You know, Anthony did it on his record that's coming out with Kevin and Joe Harley, and then we talked to Jerome Sabah, and he's done that a lot.
The guys at JMI, they look to do
You guys
that
at
as well.
JMI have done that some, yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't know what the question is really, just the fact that I love the record. It sounds awesome, but
Yeah.
like, what is that? Do you like? I think we've heard that it's kind of a little scary and challenging compared to, you know, everybody having their own mix box and headphones and stuff. What did you get out of that experience?
It meant that I could really play with space because I was aware of what the music was sounding like in real time.
Mhm.
I wasn't going to overplay,
Mhm.
because maybe I made some funny mix that, you're always making these adjustments to your everything all in real
Right.
time all the time. And if you feel like, oh, there's not much happening right now, maybe I need to lean in, maybe I need to do more. But when you don't have headphones on and you're just in the room listening to it as music, you have a better sense of, does it need more? So sometimes it does, but
Right.
so I think it allowed me to play to leave more space. There's a couple of acoustic tunes on the record. There's a song called Sidewalk Chalk, and there's a song
Mhm.
called There's Always One. And even the acoustic, like, I mean, yeah, we did use the pickup as well, but the sound that you hear on the record is a blend of the close-up microphones and the
Mhm.
pickup and some in the room. Even that, like, I'm sitting, I
Yeah.
mean, if I had a cookie, I could throw it and Joey could catch it. Like, we're just sitting close to each other, and
Mhm.
Larry's there, and we're not that much isolation. And Joey could play at a level where I could play acoustic guitar without overplaying it. And I mean, I'm ostensibly the producer of this record, but I have to give Scott Petito a lot of credit because he mixed it, and a lot of the sound of the record is him. But in a way, Joey made a lot of the choices that a producer might make. Like, it was his idea to do it without headphones. It was his idea for me to play some acoustic guitar, which was an accident.
Mhm.
I had made some acoustic during the writing process. He asked me if I could send him some demos so he could like hear what the music sounds like.
Mhm.
And I recorded it on acoustic guitar because it was expedient. I just put my iPhone down and I played through the tunes and he could hear them. So he got the idea, oh, cool, we're going to make a record with acoustic guitar. Even though that wasn't my intention, it was just.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when he showed up and he said, "Great, I'm excited, acoustic guitar," and I kind of scratched my head and I thought, well, I'll bring it. And so no headphones, acoustic guitar, some bluesiness, like
Mhm.
on And They All Sang. Those were all things that came out of conversations with Joey.
Yeah, and they all sang in
Yeah.
Sidewalk Chalk really stuck out to me when I heard
Yeah.
them. I also
Yeah.
listened to you put those sketches out
Yeah.
on iTunes, right?
Yeah,
Those acoustic sketches from that record. I listened to those this morning too. It was really neat.
yeah.
Well, it
Thanks.
was really interesting to see, like, your ideas and then what the final form was. So for everybody, definitely check out both versions.
Yeah. And are you guys touring this record? Because in parallel, you also have your Versus project. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So the short answer to are we touring with the trio record? No, but I've done a bunch of shows around the US. I haven't done it in Europe, but I've done it with different local rhythm sections. I went to Chicago and played with the Chicago rhythm section. I went to Nashville, played with the Nashville rhythm section. Went to Minneapolis, played with the Minneapolis rhythm section, and so on. Economically, it's the only way I've really been able to do it. Joey lives in Berlin, and
Oh, wow.
and I don't have an agent. I'm just booked. Anytime you see me playing live, it's just me. I must have emailed somebody or called somebody. So I don't have the leverage really to take those guys on tour, but we play when we can. Well, I mean, that trio hasn't played since we recorded, but I've done New York version of it with Larry Grenadier and Kenny Wallison, who's a dear old friend.
Cool.
So yeah, and then the Versus record. Thanks for asking. That band. So I have a band that's called Rich Hinman versus Adam Levy. Rich Hinman plays pedal steel and lap steel, and we've got a rhythm section. Rich and I 10 years ago were living in LA, and we had a version of that band with a great Los Angeles rhythm section. Jay Bellerose on drums and Jen Condos on bass. And then he and I both moved back to the East Coast, and so we've been doing it with Dan Reeser on drums and Chris Morrissey on bass, who you guys might know. We play live every chance that we can. The West Coast band made a record, and that's on Bandcamp. It's not on my Bandcamp page, but we have our separate Rich Hinman versus Adam Levy Bandcamp page where you can hear that record. And we have a new record that's coming out in May with that, with the East Coast rhythm section, and that's going to be called Fan Favorites.
Okay.
It's half originals and half covers. And it's that I love that band. If I could play with that band more than 5 or 6 times a year, that's kind of all we can do because people are in different places and busy and stuff. But I love that band. It's really represents. I've been friends with Rich for a really long time, and I think it's a nice showcase for the way that we play together.
Definitely. Yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting about the Spry album is just the format, the trio, the guitar, the pianoless trio, right? I just love that. I love it when Sonny Rollins did it with the saxophone.
Oh yeah.
There was a record I was listening to this morning, this record, Green Street by Grant Green, same format, right? Beautiful. So yeah, I was wondering this. Do you play a lot of or have you written a lot of music with piano? Or is that kind of the theme that or do you hate the piano because you didn't, you couldn't play it very well? So you're like, screw this instrument, it's not going to be on my records,
No, not at all. Not at all. I have played with pianists. I mean, I made a duo record with my grandfather. You can find it. It's way down near the bottom of my Bandcamp page. It's called With My Guitar and You. When my grandfather was 80 and I was 30, he called me up and he said, "Do you want to make a record?" I said, "Okay." So we did.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And when I lived in San Francisco, I played a lot with a great jazz singer who also plays piano. Her name is Shanna Carlson. And so I did a lot of that. But I don't know why I haven't recorded much with piano. I've done a few organ trio records. I've made
cool.
Yeah.
I have a record called Buttermilk Channel with Larry Goldings.
Yeah, it's a great record.
Thanks. And I have a record called Town and Country with Larry Goldings and Matt Chamberlain on drums. And I have a record called Humdinger. It's an organ trio with great musicians from Texas. So I've done that, but I'm not against the piano at all. It's funny you mention it. I mean, if you look at my all the stuff on my Bandcamp, I think there's either zero piano or close to zero. I have no explanation for that.
I'm definitely going to check out those organ records because that was going to be my
Yeah.
other question. Had you done a lot of organ trio
cool.
stuff? 'Cause I just love that format so much. It's such a cool format.
It's the greatest. I mean, that is, I think, the ultimate thing. And I've had organ trios that I never got to even record with. Like what you see in my discography is only some of the organ trio stuff I've got to do. And I love that format. It's maybe the ultimate for as a guitar player. That's my favorite thing.
All right, now I got to quiz you on that real quick. Do you have some favorite like old school organ trio records?
I do. Well, there's a Jimmy Smith record called Ballads that's on Blue Note, and I have to confess I don't know if this was a compilation or it's not called Ballads. Sorry, it's called Standards. It's got a red cover. It's got Donald Bailey and Kenny Burrell. And it always sounds to me like it's one session, but it might be something that was pulled from a couple of sessions. I'm not sure. But that trio, Kenny Burrell, Jimmy Smith, and Donald Bailey on drums, they do Little Girl Blue and they do Ruby, and just great repertoire and great sound. I love that record. It's not organ trio. Well, okay. There's a Grant Green record called "I Want to Hold Your Hand," which actually has the that Beatles song on it. But that's a great record with Larry Young and Elvin, I think.
Yeah, Blue Note just reissued that on the Tone series.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's a larger record that's I think it's under Stanley Turrentine's name. Stanley Turrentine with Shirley Scott and Kenny Burrell. That's called it's called Hustlin', I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not strictly a trio, but I love that. And I guess and then the Wes, the incredible Wes Montgomery record with Mel Ryan is pretty remarkable. And Boss guitar, I love. Yeah.
Well, that Riverside West Montgomery stuff's amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah.
I did want to ask for the Spry session, when you guys are kind of approaching that work, is there rehearsal that's done? I mean, are you just going in and kind of understanding where you're going to, understanding essentially how you're going to play, and then you just kind of record the first take, or is there time where you guys are able to work through the material? Is that needed?
Yeah. So I like to rehearse. I like to plan. I'm a planner. But it wasn't practical in this case because, like I said, because Joey lives in Berlin. So we did a kind of the modern day rehearsal, which is I put a bunch of stuff in Dropbox. I made charts. I made these acoustic guitar recordings. I did, Larry lives in Kingston, which is not too far outside of New York City. So one day I did ride the train up to his place and we got together as a duo and played through some of the tunes. And I did get together with a couple other rhythm sections, friends of mine who were generous enough. I asked like, hey, I'm going to make this record with this band, but, could I pay you or buy you lunch or whatever to just, hang out for an afternoon and play through the music so I could get a sense of it. So I had played it with some other rhythm sections. I played it with Larry as a duo. I sent these guys the music, and Joey told me he played through everything just with listening to my acoustic guitar stuff and just playing brushes. And we had 3 studio days, which maybe we could have done it as like, okay, let's rehearse one day and record the next 2 days. But Larry and Joey both were like, wow, let's just record and, see what happens. Because that's the other way you could do it, is you could just start. And if you wind up on day 3 listening back and like, oh yeah, we didn't really get that one. Let's go back to that tune from the first day. We had the luxury of time to do that. and it turned out great. I'm starting to wonder if rehearsal is as necessary as I believe it is,
Well, I'm sure, especially with like, just level of investment and just making the most, you want to be as prepared as possible. And there's probably a level of that where you don't want to, so I totally get that. I'm the same. I would be the same way. So we've been now going for well over an hour. There is a lot more we wanted to get
We
through.
should definitely do a part 2, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever you're ready to come back, whatever projects you're working on, I mean, we would love to have you back. There is like, we know that you are a chairperson at a college. We wanted to get into that that aspect of your life. There's a lot more we want to dive into, but there's so much that we couldn't get to it today, and we really wanted to focus on Spry as well.
Yes.
We were all really excited to talk to you about that. So, but I just wanted to thank you for carving out the time and coming and hanging out with us, and we'll link all of Adam's social media, his Bandcamp, in the description, so people can find you and check out the album. Felipe, Chris, any final thoughts?
I just really had a good time talking to you, Adam, and thanks for joining us. And I really enjoyed. Oh, I did have one final question. Do you have any plans to put the new record out on vinyl at any point?
That's a good question. I want to just back up and make one correction, which is to say,
Okay.
I'm not the chair at LACM anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's okay. I had to give it up. I had to give it up being back east, but I do a lot of teaching, and so I would love to talk about that side of things, because I have done that, and that would be good to talk about. But to answer Chris's question about the vinyl, I would love to hear it on vinyl. I live in a very small apartment in New York, and so the idea of boxes of vinyl here feels impractical, but enough people want to hear it. We are doing vinyl for the new Versus record.
Oh, excellent.
That record, again, it's going to be called Fan Favorites, and it'll come out in May. That is on vinyl. For Spry, I only did digital and CD. And if you guys know of somebody who does like limited edition pressing, it seems like I get enough requests for that that I should do it. I don't want to do 500 of it, but maybe I could do a limited run of Spry on vinyl. The artwork is beautiful, and I think it would sound really great on vinyl. So maybe I'll do that, but no real plans for now.
Well, Adam, also thank you so much for joining us today, for the patience, all the rescheduling, all the adjustments that we had to do. Thank you for your patience, for being so kind, and for telling us amazing stories about music, about your life. And there's just so much more that we want to go through, and definitely we're gonna have you joining us again for sure.
Great, guys. Mike, Chris, Felipe, thank you so much. Really a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, and everyone, please share this. Drop some comments. Let us know what you thought about the interview, or any thoughts in general, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.